retirement system. Today is Thursday, May 29th, 2025. Time now is 12:32. Please be reminded that the committee meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the BERS YouTube channel. I'll now begin the meeting by calling the roll. Frank Sarabella.
Present.
Donald Nesbitt. I don't know what he said. Present. Greg Faulkner. Here. Anthony Giordano. Alice is sitting in for Tony and Karina Pollock.
Here.
We have a quorum. I'd also like to note for the record, see, is anyone there from the controller's office?
No, we have just Rima.
No, that's all. Okay, so I won't know. Agenda item number 1 is to consider the
Okay,
minutes.
sorry. Does anyone know who that is?
Rima?
Remember, she's a trustee.
A trustee. Okay, yeah. Sometimes we've had spots.
To consider the minutes from the May 6th Executive Committee meeting, which is included in your packet. Sent prior to the meeting, may I have a motion to approve these minutes?
Motion.
Motion made by Frank. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Kareem. All those in favor? Oh, any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of approving those minutes, please indicate if you're in favor.
In favor.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? The motion carries. Next, we have some introductory comments from Innovation and Risk Department Lead, Seville Mehta. Topics touched on will be assumptions, assets, and liability risk management, performance, funding for profit, excluded securities, pipeline, and other interesting topics. May we have a motion to consider? Motion made by Kareem.
Second.
Second, Frank. Hello, tell us more.
Sure, thank you. Well, people online, we can't hear people online if they're. Do you just work on that? I'll start speaking. There's like I said, a few different topics. We're going to be covering assumptions on a little bit of an accelerated process over, the next couple meetings. In general, what we're seeing from both consultants as well as research that we've gotten is that the underlying forward return assumptions for a variety of risky assets is coming down just a little bit. I've noticed something that's noteworthy is that for private equity, it comes down very, very slightly from like 10.1%, which is what we've had a few years ago, to 9.8%. And the standard deviations are a little bit high. One of the charts that Bertram helped create this with my instructions, is just kind of show where we have been on a couple asset classes in terms of our underlying weight in the portfolio. This is for US equities, and this is for private equity. So this is when we did the last asset allocation. And at that time, we were a couple percent below target. At that time, we had a huge run up in stocks. And right now we have a slight weight down in US equities and a much more significant underweight relative to target. Private equity, on the other hand, we've had, even though the assumptions have always been high in the last few years, we've had sub 5%, but yet our weight in private equity has gone up. We did bring the target down a little bit, and between the weight going up and the target come down a little bit, our overweight is gone from 3 to 5. So it's just something interesting to keep in mind. At some level, we are in a position where it's been a few years. We are looking to provide basically extra breathing room to still participate in private markets and without being in constant misalignment with our asset allocation. So we will and Billy will talk about this during his section, kind of his thoughts on, performance, and then just initiating a new process that we would have done anyway on a multi-year process for asset allocation. And the goal is that, there'll be a spectrum of candidate portfolios, and hopefully we'll find something with slightly higher private equity targets. Instead of 8%, maybe bring that up a few percent. And we'll see how that goes. There's going to be a lot of modeling done. I've looked at things from, to do actual cash flow projections. They have a lot of modeling that they'll need to do to put this thing together on a more formal level with the House views, and then also any specific nuances that BAM has, in the time since then. But the one thing, that might be worth considering is that when we did this a few years ago, myself, Siegel, we were spot on in saying that private equity had a really good run. It was a very risky time to continue to buy close to the top at that time, especially since we had pretty much a runaway portfolio in BERS specifically. We were continuously increasing in the few years under Antonio's watch in that asset class, and we've been wrangling with that a little bit. We've also did have some minority voices saying that U.S. equities would have huge drawdown risk if we were more exaggerated. In other words, if we had even less in U.S. equities over the last few years and even more in private markets, instead of it being in the $9 billion range, would be in the $8 billion range, high 80s perhaps in funding ratios. So we did the right calls at the right time, and I think it's prudent to explore the opportunities that would allow us to continue to participate in private equity and also have financially responsible. I think we can get there. So I'd like to acknowledge, I guess, this Maisha has a comment. And also, let's go on to the next thing here. So I'll show the performance numbers. This is a small snapshot from what we currently have audited within CAISA. It's something where they're doing a system refresh, and we can't get more granular than this at this time from them. But at a high level, you can see just the basic. These are numbers that are a little bit dated, April 30. You can see, performance now is a little bit in line with the benchmarks. It goes up over a 5-year horizon. Some of this is from private markets fiscal year to date. We do have a couple percentage point gap between BERS and underlying reference portfolios over a 5-year, but still 8.6% is higher than the hurdle. But we're sort of straddling these numbers. Billy will go into a lot more detail, so I won't need to. On some of these, but you can kind of see the numbers for what they are. And I wanted to talk about for-profit prisons. And I know, Maisha, you're here, and Greg is just a topic he brought up. Maybe 2 executive committee meetings ago for the board of trustees to weigh in on, especially the screening process. I went back and did some underlying research. I got the underlying data, which I asked for from BAM, which is what's here on the left. It's the 9 companies that get screened for having essentially at least or any of their profit coming from prisons. Okay, so any amount, 0, 100%, whatever it is. And then I've added additional information that they weren't able to provide on sort of what is the industry sector associated with this, exactly what is the metric that's being used and being screened. And then I also used artificial intelligence and went back through a number of financial statements for each of the companies to get granular information beyond the financial statements about what exactly are they doing with prisons, because it gets very murky outside of the very big companies in terms of what do they do and how do you make the call. And so I'll go through it right here, and hopefully this provides the clarity that you're looking for. Right now, we are screening out, we're filtering out Core Civic and Geo Group. These are very clear companies that do a lot of their business and their profits are generating from for-profit prisons in the US, the normal prisons that you would think about. And the cutoff has been set arbitrarily a long time ago. It's done system-wide at 20% or more. But let's look behind the hood of what happens if you were to lower that 20%, what are the 7 companies that are next in line? What type of companies are they? And so you'll notice that they're mostly international companies with the exception of Target. I'll go through them one at a time. You'll notice that there's a clustering, 19.7, it hangs around 19.9, 9.9, 4.99, 2. Sometimes companies are able to not manage their revenue, but they can manage their profits in a way that they can bypass what are known filters that would be triggered. If they went to 10, if they went to 5, they might be pulled out of other investment committees that are screening for similar criteria. So that's one thing to keep in mind. When we look at Serco Group, and actually for all of the international companies, it's not detailed in their financial reports on a geographic basis what is happening with the for-profit prisons, and it's a smaller fraction of their underlying business. But from what I can tell, it's almost all of those prisons are overseas. So the one thing you want to ask yourself, and I should know, and it would help you in sort of some criteria is, do you want to make a distinction between prisons that are in the US versus prisons that are overseas? That's one question that we need an answer for in order to filter this out. Target is US, it's at 9.99. Now, the question here is, the industry group is hotel resorts and cruise lines, and that's a historic attribution. When the committee puts these industry classifications together, that has been, this is not Target, obviously, like Walmart. This is a company that specializes in tourism and so forth. However, they do have a section of essentially immigration prisons along the southeast border of the US. Children, immigrants, it's not the normal prisons across the US. So the question over here is, for these which are government prisons, they're not, it's being classified as for-profit, but these are government prisons exclusively along the southeast border. They do have children there. What decision do you want to make on that particular case? What I also want to say is, this industry classification is a historic classification. It will change, because I've looked at this, and they have a growing and stable profit business coming from prisons. So it was smaller before when it was classified as hotels, resorts, and cruise lines. However, as this number stays steady and growing, this will likely change to a general industry class. So you can't look at just industry and say that that's an accurate reflection. It doesn't necessarily reflect what's happening in the future. And some of these are they pick a classification, but it may not necessarily represent what it is. Going on to the other ones here, Sodexo also rings, I guess, it's a French company, but they do a lot of their business that we know about in servicing food. And it's all like a lot of the schools, my child, a lot of children wind up getting their meals in the cafeteria provided by this organization. That's what they do. They have a small fraction, 1.6% of their profits are from prisons in France. However, if you kill it, essentially you would be basically pulling something that is a little bit larger on the weight within the index, and is basically, most of their business is providing food for children in cafeterias. So you have to make a call as to what's the trade-off on that. I want to sort of say this because as you go into the board of trustee meeting, you're dealing with Dan Haas and sort of trying to determine how you might want to change any of these filters. You have a little bit more information about what, because it's very easy to say, let's just drop this to 0, but I want to give you guys a sense of exactly what are the types of companies that would be filtered out. And, perhaps it needs to be a little more formulaic as opposed to just drop it to 0, unless you do want to drop to 0, but I want to give that information because you guys have asked for that and BAN didn't have it. So, but they gave me at least the confidence to work with.
I am so appreciative on this information because first and foremost, it's very sensitive. Don't misinterpret the poker faces, right? For certain people. And then also, I just definitely have to give you props and just being able to sit and unpack some of this stuff. So thank you for not doing a flyby presentation. I really
It's
appreciate that.
definitely, like, some of the information I could only pull from like investor calls, and this is where it took technology, because if you look at the financial statements, a lot of companies don't want to provide this information, and when they provide in such a aggregated way that you can't actually determine, because they do not want to actually say that they are doing anything, like,
Of course.
these companies will not say, well, we have a certain portion of our business in US for, they don't get any benefit from that.
Right.
So it's sort of dug into tables, so then the only way to get there is you have to triangulate it from other information, and sometimes in regulated sources, like off the financial statement, you have to go into investor calls and actually like hear what the Q&A is and stuff. No.
Okay, can we, I mean.
Oh, if you want, I could send you, I did a.
Okay, so it's not in the packet.
Oh, well, we had so many changes at the last, but I can send you underlying information from my notes on each of the companies,
Great, that would be so great. And I would love the fact that if we also can continue to unpack some of this, because what also comes up for me is Amendment 13. And if that shows up in any particular way, what are the incarcerated people, what are they getting paid to do this work? And is it, Amendment 13 is, you can, anyway, that's a long story, but just what it actually looks like. And I appreciate just take a moment to look at this. I just wanted to say that.
So Lil, I do have a question on this. Depending on the industry, can we do a deeper dive to see exactly, like if a company is in the restaurant industry, they may be selling food, right? So the inmates can eat.
So that goes, that.
That to me would be,
Different.
I'm a company
They
owner, that
literally-
would be different than someone
I pay my child to eat Sudeco every
who's
day at
benefiting
school.
from folks actually going to prison. So if we,
Oh, they're also obviously serving meals in prisons too, but most of their business is really schools, catering.
yeah, but just the
But their
percentages.
prison
And-
business is also catering?
Is 1.6%. Yeah, catering for prisons in France. So
Yeah, because when you just say they're
Prisons.
making money from prisons in France.
they're
it's
not
a
doing
little bit
security
different.
guard detail or anything.
Yeah, so,
They're making sure that people in prison are getting a healthy meal.
yeah,
I mean.
and I asked that question because, I remember sometime a few years ago, we had a vote on a company, it was actually like a communication phone company to prisons. And the board voted no against it, and I know as a relative of somebody who my brother did 27 years for a crime he did not commit, but his only pipeline to us and to family was the new technology and communication that he was able to receive. And if you look at some of what's happening even in New York State prisons, communication is a pipeline. Where there's no communication, there's stories where inmates are actually killed, their families don't know for years, right? So there's a whole lot that goes into it. I mean,
So what I've read is the Japanese companies, they're hard to detangle. They do the communications, but that's communication that's both telephonic, but as well as surveillance and video. So you can't, what
Yeah.
you're getting at is the separation.
and
of
you
those
know what,
two.
I'm not even being technical into going into the communication versus food. Just if we have a better breakdown, we're better informed as to somebody benefiting from folks actually going to prison, right? Versus
Providing
somebody who
services.
provided services for folks who are incarcerated. But this, I do want to say, this is valuable information for us to actually look, so I commend you for putting this together.
So like, we don't have too many more topics here, but I wanted to, just mention the pipeline. This was at some folks saw it at the investment committee meeting. And Nash is not here to sort of talk about it in great detail, but it was it was a little bit generalized. And here's the sort of big takeaways. I've looked at this a few times in recent weeks. I also had Bertram look at this, and I've asked Nash questions about the The thing that, so the dollar amounts are not later for the future. They're just, by the way, we'll do a proper introduction later, but Nikita is here. They'll pick up at least most of the formal pipeline information, the way I've set up the templates that would provide this going forward that Oxy did. But, with the pipeline, if you look at just the counts, the fraction over the last year, like 2024 calendar year, the fraction that has come from MWB firms across the private markets was running around 18%. It's 5 out of roughly 20. We've had 4 in the pipeline that were not in private markets, but when you look at what's going forward in the pipeline the next 12 months, any way you slice it, there is a decrease in the fraction of investments that would be MWBE. They haven't gone down to the BIPOC level. So no one's hiding that. It's in the pipeline. I don't know what the answer is for that, but it's just there. And the number, and this is just by count, not by dollar amount. It went from 18%, it could be down to around 16%, depending on which metric you use. There's some benign hypotheses, which I've already rejected because I've looked at this before, but it's there. This is something to bring up. But if you think about what is the pipeline going forward, what happens if you increase your allocations to private markets, what's the flavor of companies coming in? I just want to note that that's the one thing that's kind of from your head. Oh, and then one thing I could mention that would be benign is that we did with Oxia try to pull forward some of the BIPOC investments before they rolled off. So there's a little bit, but I wouldn't say it's enough to compensate for like this overall effect. So I think that's all unless
Any further questions?
I just wanted to know, is it safe to say that there are some distinctions between the private and the public prisons and how they go about?
I don't know, but these are all publicly traded companies so that you get those disclosures and information and are able to, I'll follow up on that.
Okay.
These are publicly traded.
This is Tony. I just came on.
Hi, Tony.
Hey, was there any discussion of Vistria?
No.
Okay. A one BIPOC firm that was in the real estate portfolio that I think there was some concerns about. It was tabled at TRS. It was tabled also at NYCBERS, but NYCBERS assured me that they're going to do it. They just needed to get the side letter done. But it was a firm that we may want to look at if Donald is okay with it.
Why don't we bring that up?
Is that something else?
It's not for today, but did you want to bring this up?
Yeah.
I think,
Stay here for a minute.
okay, we can capture that, but it's not for this meeting.
How about Target? How does Target show up in this?
Oh, well, that Target was Target Hospitality. That's not the Target like the merchandising company and food company. This is a company with a similar name, but they grew up in hospitality and tourism. That's how they got their inroads in Texas. But then they started branching off into from hotels to doing facilities.
Thank you for the clarity.
Yeah. Tony, we'll follow up on that. I think I'm.
Any other questions? There's no further questions from the
Just ask you
committee.
to share that with us, that document with us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The next item is for executive session. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Motion made by Corinne. Do we have a second? Alice, second. All right. Correct. We'll now report out from executive session. In executive session, the trustees had one approval, one discussion on our preliminary fiscal year 2025 performance. This was the last item on our agenda for today's executive committee meeting. The next scheduled meeting is for June 24th at 12:30. May I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
So moved.
Motion made. Second by Mahisha. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, please indicate if you're in favor. Aye. Any,
Nope.
nope,
Abstentions, no.
any abstentions? The meeting is officially adjourned.